The morning sun cast long shadows across Earth's International University of Sinological Studies as Kixexa stepped off the transport pod. Her iridescent scales shimmered between blue and green, reflecting her excitement and nervousness. As the first Zenthari to join the university's exchange program, she knew all eyes would be on her, both human and alien alike. Professor Chen waited at the bottom of the pod's ramp, a warm smile on her face. "Welcome to Earth, student Kixexa. I trust your journey was comfortable." Kixexa's translator chip processed the words smoothly. "Yes, Professor. Though I must note that your planet's gravity is interesting." She shifted her weight from one leg to another, trying to adjust to Earth's pull. "You'll get used to it," the professor assured her. "Now let me introduce you to your student guide. Jake, over here." A young human male jogged over, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He had dark curly hair and warm brown skin, and his face bore what Kixexa's cultural database identified as a friendly grin. "Hi, I'm Jake Martinez," he said, extending his hand. Kixexa stared at it for a moment before remembering the human custom of handshaking. She carefully extended her own four-fingered hand, trying not to scratch him with her scales. "Fascinating," she muttered, making notes in her personal datapad. Humans really do engage in physical contact as a greeting. Most inefficient, yet somehow charming. Jake laughed, a sound that made Kixexa's scales ripple with curiosity. "Just wait until you learn about high fives," he said, winking at Professor Chen. As they walked through the campus, Kixexa's head swiveled constantly, taking in everything. She recorded observations about the various species of plants, the architecture, and especially the humans. There were so many of them, all different colors and sizes, moving in what seemed like chaos but somehow worked. "And this will be your dormitory," Jake said, stopping in front of a modern building with large windows. "Your room is on the 3rd floor. There's an elevator if you—" "Jake," Kixexa interrupted, her scales turning a pale yellow of confusion. "Why are there flat surfaces in the windows?" "Those are beds," he explained. "For sleeping." Kix's scales shifted to bright orange in alarm. "You mean humans actually lie down to sleep, horizontally?" Jake nodded, trying not to smile at her reaction. "Yeah, most of us do." "How do Zentharians sleep?" "Standing up, of course. Like any sensible species." Her tail twitched with agitation. "Lying down while unconscious. That's completely exposed. Vulnerable. What if a predator comes?" "We don't really have to worry about predators in the dorms," Jake said, but Kixexa was already pulling out her datapad, recording frantically. Subject: Human sleep patterns. Observation 1. Humans deliberately place themselves in compromised positions for extended periods of unconsciousness. Hypothesis: either suicidal tendencies or unknown defensive capabilities. Further study required. Professor Chen, who had been quietly watching this exchange, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should show Kixexa to her room. We've installed a vertical sleeping pod for her comfort." As they rode the elevator up, Kixexa couldn't stop staring at Jake. How could this species have survived long enough to develop space travel if they spent a third of their lives lying helpless? There had to be more to this story, and she was going to figure it out. "Jake," she said suddenly, her scales shifting to the deep purple of determination, "I require your assistance with a research project." "Sure, what's it about?" "I need to understand why humans are so peculiar, starting with this sleeping business. Will you help me?" Jake looked at her eager expression and grinned. This was going to be an interesting semester. "Count me in," he said, not knowing he had just signed up for the strangest few months of his life. Professor Chen just smiled. After all, the best sinological discoveries often started with simple questions, even if those questions were about why humans like to sleep lying down. 3 days into her research, Kixexa sat in the university cafeteria, her scales a deep blue of concentration as she watched humans with their morning drinks. Her data pad was covered in notes, and Jake sat across from her, sipping his third cup of coffee. Observation 27. She muttered into her recorder. Humans begin their day by consuming dark, bitter liquid containing known stimulants, possibly to counter effects of their dangerous horizontal sleeping habits. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. It's just caffeine, he explained, wiping his mouth. It helps us wake up. Kicksaw's scales flashed orange with alarm. You deliberately poison yourselves to wake up. She quickly added another note. Fascinating and disturbing. Before Jake could explain further, Kicksaw spotted a student falling asleep over their textbook at a nearby table. Her tail went rigid with excitement. Look, the poison is failing. That human is losing consciousness while sitting up. Perhaps they're evolving. No, Sarah's just pulling an all-nighter for her exams, Jake said, but Kicksaw was already rushing over to help what she thought was a medical emergency. Fellow student, she announced loudly, her scales now flashing warning colors. You must not surrender to horizontal tendencies in public. It's dangerous. She tried to prop Sarah up with her tail. Sarah jerked awake, blinking in confusion at the colorful alien trying to keep her upright. What's happening? I am preventing your evolutionary regression, Kicksaw declared proudly. Jake, bring the bitter survival poison quickly. The entire cafeteria was watching now, some students filming on their phones, others trying not to laugh. Jake hurried over with a fresh cup of coffee, deciding it was easier to play along than explain. Professor Chen, who happened to be getting her own morning coffee, noticed the commotion. She walked over just as Kicksaw was explaining to a very confused Sarah about proper Zen theory sleeping posture. Kicksaw, the professor said gently, perhaps we should discuss your research methods. Of course, Professor. I've made remarkable discoveries. Kicksaw's scales rippled with academic excitement. Humans are clearly fighting their body's need for horizontal rest. They use stimulant potions, prop themselves upright with books, and some even try to sleep while walking. Those are called zombies, Jake muttered, but quickly added, I mean, sleep-deprived students. Professor Chen sat down with them, seeing a teaching opportunity. Kicksaw, why don't you tell me about your research goals? I'm studying the evolutionary disadvantages of human sleep patterns, Kicksaw explained, her tail swishing with enthusiasm. For example, this morning I observed 17 humans sleeping through their first classes. Clearly, their horizontal sleeping makes them vulnerable to academic predators. Academic predators? Sarah asked, now fully awake and intrigued. Yes, like your pop quizzes and surprise assignments. Most dangerous. Kicksaw nodded seriously. Professor Chen managed to keep a straight face. Have you considered that different species might have different biological needs? Kicksaw's scales shifted to a thoughtful green. But lying down, it's so. She struggled to find the right word. Comfortable, Jake suggested. Inefficient, Kicksaw declared. And yet, she looked at her notes. Humans have achieved remarkable things despite this habit. There must be a connection I'm missing. Why don't you focus your research on understanding rather than judging? Professor Chen suggested. The scientific method requires an open mind. Kicksaw's scales rippled with determination. You're right. I need more data. She turned to Jake. We must observe a full human sleep cycle. For science. Jake looked at her eager expression and sighed. Why do I feel like I'm going to regret this? Professor Chen smiled as she walked away. Sometimes the best way to learn about other species was to let them learn about you, even if it meant becoming an unwitting research subject in an alien's quest to understand why humans love their bed so much. This is completely unnecessary, Jake said, staring at the transformation of Kicksaw's dorm room. The once simple space now looked like a mad scientist's laboratory. Kicksaw's scales glowed with pride as she adjusted another monitoring device. Science is always necessary, Jake. Tonight, I will attempt horizontal sleep, like a human. She had turned her room into what she called a controlled sleep environment. Sensors covered the walls. 3 cameras hung from the ceiling. Most notably, she had pushed her Zentheri sleeping pod into a corner to make room for what she thought was a proper human bed. It wasn't. "Kix-za," Jake said slowly. "That's an anti-gravity generator with a blanket on it." "Exactly." Her tail swished excitedly. "Humans use soft platforms for sleeping, yes. This is much more advanced. It will protect me from gravity while I attempt your strange horizontal position. That's not how beds work." "Sha." She held up one scaled finger. "I have prepared everything according to my research." She pointed to her datapad. "Step 1. Lie flat, like deceased prey." Jake tried not to laugh. "Like what?" "Step 2. Cover body with primitive temperature regulation cloth." She grabbed a blanket decorated with little cartoon spaceships. "You mean a blanket." "Step 3. Activate brain shutdown sequence by closing optical sensors." "You mean close your eyes and go to sleep." Kixta nodded seriously. "I have also prepared emergency protocols." She pointed to a large red button on the wall. "If I show signs of evolutionary regression, the alarm will wake me." "Signs of what?" "Snoring. My research shows it's a common human affliction." Her scales shifted to a worried purple. "Does it hurt?" Jake sat down in the room's only chair, realizing this was going to be a long night. "No, it doesn't hurt. And you don't need all this equipment. People just lie down and sleep naturally." "Nothing about horizontal sleep is natural," Kix-Sa declared, but she straightened her lab coat, which she had insisted on wearing for the experiment, and approached the anti-gravity generator. "Begin recording." Test subject Kix-Sa. Attempting human sleep position, trial 1. With the stiff dignity of someone about to do something very brave and very stupid, she lay down on the generator. Her tail hung off awkwardly. "Now what?" she asked, staring at the ceiling. "Now you relax and go to sleep." "Impossible. My brain is fully active." "How do humans force unconsciousness?" "We don't force it. We just let it happen." Kix-Sa's scales flickered with frustration. "Unacceptable. There must be a technique." She began breathing very loudly, something she'd seen humans do in meditation videos. "That's not." "Sha, I'm initiating shutdown." For the next hour, Jake watched as Kix-Sa tried various methods to fall asleep. She counted backwards from 1,000. She hummed what she thought were human lullabies. They weren't. She even tried lying completely still, her scales locked in what she called sleep camouflage. Finally, around midnight, her breathing actually did slow down. Her scales settled into a calm blue color. "It's working," she whispered excitedly. "Kix-Sa, if you're talking, you're not sleeping." "Oh, right." She went quiet again. Jake was about to suggest they end the experiment when he noticed she had actually fallen asleep. He smiled, getting up quietly to leave, and then remembered the anti-gravity generator was still running. "Oh no," he muttered, just as the generator hiccuped. Kix-Sa floated gently up to the ceiling, still sound asleep, her tail and limbs drifting peacefully in zero gravity. The blanket floated up after her like a gentle ghost. Jake looked at the floating alien, then at all the recording equipment and sighed. Tomorrow's research notes were going to be interesting. He grabbed a pillow and settled into the chair, knowing someone should probably be around when gravity decided to return. Above him, Kix-Sa smiled in her sleep, dreaming about what she would write in her paper. Human sleeping position achieved, with minor anti-gravitational modifications. The emergency sirens blared across campus at 2 a.m., making Kix-Sa's scales flash bright orange in surprise. She had just finished writing notes about her floating sleep experiment when the power went out, plunging the entire university into darkness. "Emergency protocols activated," announced the AI system. "All students please proceed to the underground shelter. This is not a drill. Severe magnetic storm approaching." Jake appeared at her door, flashlight in hand. "Come on, we need to go." "But my research equipment." "Leave it. The magnetic storm could fry everything anyway." They joined the stream of students heading to the shelter. Humans, Xanthari, and various other alien species moved quickly but calmly through the dark hallways. Kix's natural bioluminescence helped light the way for several younger students around her. The underground shelter was huge, designed to hold the entire university population. As they entered, Kix's scales shifted to a curious green. Here was a perfect opportunity to observe human behavior during a crisis. "Look how calm they are," she whispered to Jake, watching students set up sleeping bags and blankets on the floor. "Shouldn't they be more worried about being underground?" "Why would we be?" Jake asked, setting up their spot in a corner. "It's like," she searched for the right words, "like being in a prey animal's burrow. Trapped. No escape routes." A human child from one of the professor's families walked past them, giggling and wearing pajamas with little stars on them. "But that's what makes it safe," the girl said, overhearing them. "Bad things can't get in either." Kix's scales flickered with surprise. She hadn't thought of it that way. As the hours passed, she watched in fascination as humans adapted to their situation. They shared snacks, told stories, and even organized a small game tournament on battery-powered devices. But what really caught her attention was how they slept. Some students dozed sitting against walls. Others curled up in corners. A few even slept sitting up in chairs. And none of them seemed worried about being vulnerable. "Jake," she whispered, poking him with her tail. "Jake, are you observing this?" "Nem." He opened one eye. He had been dozing against the wall. "Humans can sleep anywhere, in any position. This completely changes my research." An older professor nearby chuckled. "Ever seen soldiers sleep standing up? Humans can sleep pretty much anywhere if we're tired enough." Kix's scales turned a deep blue of concentration as she made notes on her backup datapad. "But why? How is this an advantage?" "Because we had to," said another student, joining the conversation. Early humans needed to sleep in all sorts of places while hunting or hiding from predators. Being able to rest anywhere meant survival. "Fascinating." Kix's tail swished with excitement. "So the very thing I thought was a weakness is actually a strength," Jake finished, yawning. "We're adaptable." As the night went on, Kix felt her own eyes getting heavy. The shelter was warm, the low hum of conversations was soothing, and without meaning to, she found herself drifting off. She woke up hours later to find she had fallen asleep sitting against the wall, just like the humans around her. Her scales turned pink with embarrassment when she realized Jake had caught her sleeping in a human position. "Don't worry," he grinned. "Your secret is safe with me." As the all-clear signal finally sounded and students began heading back to their dorms, Kix walked quietly, lost in thought. She had come to Earth thinking she would document human weaknesses. Instead, she was discovering that what looked like weakness from the outside might actually be strength in disguise. "Jake," she said suddenly, her scales shimmering with determination, "I need to completely rewrite my research paper. Human sleep patterns aren't a disadvantage at all. They're revolutionary," he suggested with a smile. "Exactly. Now help me design new experiments." "And this time," she added, her scales turning slightly purple with embarrassment, "maybe we'll skip the anti-gravity generator." The university library was quiet except for the excited swishing of Kix's tail as she paced back and forth, her scales shifting between thoughtful green and excited yellow. Jake sat at a table surrounded by books about human sleep patterns and evolution. "It all makes sense now," Kix announced, perhaps a bit too loudly for a library. "Humans didn't just adapt to sleep lying down. They evolved because of it." A librarian shushed her. Her scales turned pink with embarrassment, but her excitement couldn't be contained. "Look at this," she whispered, shoving her datapad under Jake's nose. I've mapped human brain activity during different sleep positions. The horizontal position allows for something incredible. Jake squinted at her diagrams. What am I looking at? When humans sleep lying down, their brains process information differently than any other species. Her tail knocked over a stack of books in her excitement. Sorry, she whispered to the glaring librarian as she picked them up. Different how? Jake asked, helping her with the books. Your brains, they sort of clean themselves during horizontal sleep. All those weird dreams humans have. They're not just random. They're your brain solving problems and processing information in new ways. Professor Chen, who had been quietly observing from a nearby table, came over. That's an interesting theory, Kiksa. But how will you prove it? Kiksa's scales turned confident purple. I've collected data from 50 student volunteers. I tracked their problem-solving abilities after different sleep positions. She pulled up more charts. Look, students who got proper horizontal sleep solved puzzles 40% faster than those who slept in other positions. That could be coincidence, Jake pointed out. Ah, but then I tested other species. Her tail swished excitedly again. None of them showed the same improvement. Only humans get this benefit from horizontal sleep. She pulled up a complex 3D model showing human brain activity during sleep. See these patterns? They're similar to creativity and problem-solving patterns, but they only appear during horizontal rest. Humans aren't just sleeping. They're actively processing information in a unique way. Professor Chen looked impressed. You're suggesting that human sleep patterns contributed to their cognitive development? Yes. Kiksa's scales turned bright gold with academic pride. Think about it. While other species evolved to sleep defensively, humans evolved to sleep efficiently. They turned a vulnerable position into an advantage. But the Zenthari Scientific Council won't like this, Jake said. Didn't you say they believe standing sleep is superior? Kiksa's scales dimmed slightly. Yes, they think any other sleep position is primitive. But her scales strengthened to determine blue. The data doesn't lie. Human horizontal sleep might have helped them develop faster than other species. It might even explain why humans advance so quickly compared to other races. That's a bold claim, Professor Chen warned. You'll need solid evidence to back it up. I have evidence. Kiksa's tail started swishing again. Look at human history. Some of their biggest breakthroughs came after dreams. The periodic table, the structure of atoms, even some mathematical solutions, all discovered after sleeping horizontally. She pulled up more data. And there's more. Human children learn better after proper horizontal sleep. Adult humans solve problems better. Even human creativity increases. So, Jake said slowly, you're saying humans became smart because we're lazy and like to lie down. No, Kiksa protested, then paused. Well, sort of. But it's not lazy. It's efficient. Humans found a way to combine rest with mental processing. It's revolutionary, Professor Chen suggested with a smile. Exactly. Kiksa's scales rippled with rainbow colors of excitement. And I'm going to prove it to everyone. Even if the Zenthari Council doesn't want to hear it. The librarian shushed them again, but Kiksa barely noticed. She was too busy planning how to present her discovery to the world, her tail twitching with determination as she imagined changing everything her people thought they knew about human sleep. The university's main conference hall was packed. Humans sat alongside various alien species, all waiting to hear Kiksa's controversial presentation. On the front row sat the Zenthari Science Council members, their scales a skeptical gray color. Behind the stage, Kiksa paced nervously, her scales rapidly shifting between anxious yellow and determined blue. You've got this, Jake assured her, adjusting the human-style lab coat she had insisted on wearing. You know your research is solid. But what if they don't listen? What if they think I've been corrupted by human ideas? Her tail wrapped around itself, a sign of extreme Zenthari stress. Professor Chen approached them with a smile. Remember, Kikska, good science speaks for itself. Are you ready? Before Kiksa could answer, the lights dimmed. It was time. She walked onto the stage, her scales automatically shifting to formal purple. The huge screen behind her lit up with her first slide. Human sleep patterns, an evolutionary advantage. Honorable council members, fellow scientists, she began, her translator chip working perfectly. I came to Earth believing I would document human weaknesses. Instead, I discovered something extraordinary. Her scales flickered as she noticed the head of the Zenthari Council, Dr. Zexri, watching her with disapproval. But she continued, bringing up her brain scan comparisons. We've always believed that sleeping standing up was superior, more alert, more defensive, more logical. She paused. We were wrong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Dr. Zexri's scales turned an angry red. Look at these patterns, Kiksa continued, showing her data. When humans sleep horizontally, their brains don't just rest. They reorganize information. They solve problems. They create. She played a time-lapse video of human brain activity during sleep, the neural patterns dancing across the screen in beautiful colors. But that's primitive behavior, Dr. Zexri interrupted, standing up, lying down like prey animals. Kiksa's scales flashed with confidence. With respect, Doctor, let me show you something interesting. She switched to her next slide. These are my own brain scans. The audience leaned forward. This is my brain during traditional Zenthari standing sleep. She pointed to the first image. And this is my brain after I accidentally fell asleep horizontally during the magnetic storm. The differences were striking. The second scan showed patterns similar to the human ones, more active, more complex. I tested this multiple times, she continued, her voice growing stronger. The results were always the same. Horizontal sleep allows for better neural processing. Humans didn't develop this way despite sleeping lying down. They evolved this way because of it. She brought up more data, test scores, problem-solving rates, creativity measurements. Humans turned a position of vulnerability into a position of strength. While other species stayed alert for danger, humans used sleep to become smarter. Dr. Zexri's scales were now flashing between angry red and confused green. But our studies were incomplete. Kiksa finished politely. We never tested horizontal sleep properly because we assumed it was inferior. But look at human advancement rates compared to other species. Look at their problem-solving abilities. Look at their creativity. She played her final video, a compilation of human achievements, discoveries, and innovations. All this from a species that spends a third of their life lying down. Not because they're weak, but because they found a way to make rest more efficient than any other species. The hall was silent. Then, from the back, someone started applauding. More joined in. Even some council members' scales were showing interested purple colors. Dr. Zexri remained standing, his scales now a confused mix of colors. You really believe this research justifies changing thousands of years of Zenthari sleeping tradition? Kiksa's scales settled into a calm, confident blue. No, doctor. I don't believe it. I can prove it. She smiled. Would you like to see the experiment results, or would you prefer to try it yourself? In the front row, Jake grinned. He had a feeling the university was about to need more horizontal sleeping pods. 3 months after her groundbreaking presentation, Kiksa stood in her dorm room, packing her research materials. Her scales glowed with a mix of happiness and sadness, the end-of-semester colors that many alien students showed during departure time. I can't believe the Zenthari Council actually approved further research, Jake said, helping her carefully pack her data pads. And they're funding a whole sleep study center. Kiksa's tail swished proudly. 5 more Zenthari scientists are coming to Earth next semester. And look, she showed him her data pad. 3 other species have requested permission to study human sleep patterns. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Zexry entered, his scales now a much friendlier shade of blue than during the presentation. "Student Kix Za," he said formally, then surprised her by smiling. "Or should I say, Professor Kix Za?" Her scales flashed bright yellow with shock. "Professor, the Council has reviewed your work. We want you to lead the new Human Sleep Study Department at the Scifi Science Academy." He paused, his scales showing slight embarrassment. "And I owe you an apology." "You do?" "Yes, I was resistant to your ideas. But after trying horizontal sleep myself," his scales turned a shy pink, "I solved a quantum physics problem that had bothered me for years. In a dream." Jake tried not to laugh at the serious alien scientist's excitement. "There's more," Dr. Zexry continued. "We've begun preliminary tests on other species. It seems some can benefit from horizontal rest too, if they start young enough. You've opened up an entirely new field of sinological sleep studies." Kix's scales rippled with pride, but then turned slightly blue with worry. "But what about my Earth studies?" "Oh, you'll still be based here part-time," Dr. Zexry assured her. "We need to maintain our connection with the human scientists. In fact," he looked at Jake, "we were hoping your research partner would consider joining our team." Jake blinked in surprise. "Me? You've shown remarkable patience in helping Kixera understand human sleep patterns. We need more humans who can explain their unique perspectives." As they discussed the details, Professor Chen appeared at the door. "I heard the good news, though I'll miss my most enthusiastic student." "Actually, Professor," Kixsa said, her scales turning formal purple, "I have something for you." She handed over a datapad. "My final research paper. I called it The Human Advantage: How Horizontal Sleep Shaped Galactic History." Professor Chen smiled as she read the first page. "An excellent title. Though I hope you included that incident with the anti-gravity generator as an example of what not to do," Kixsa said, her scales pink with embarrassment, while Jake laughed. Later that evening, after all the paperwork was signed and plans were made, Kixsa stood looking out her dorm window at the setting sun. Her regular sleeping pod had been replaced with a combination pod that could shift between vertical and horizontal positions, the first prototype of what would soon become standard issue for Zentheri students on Earth. "You know what's funny?" Jake said, joining her at the window. "All this started because you thought humans were weird for lying down to sleep." "We still think you're weird," she replied, her scales twinkling with amusement. "Just weird in a good way, a smart way." She paused. "Though I still don't understand why humans drool in their sleep. That will have to be my next research project." As the stars began appearing in the darkening sky, Kixsa thought about how far she'd come from that first day when she'd been horrified by human beds. Sometimes the best discoveries came from questioning your most basic assumptions, and sometimes what looked like a weakness could turn out to be the greatest strength of all. "Jake," she said suddenly, her scales turning curious green, "humans also sleep sitting in chairs with their faces on desks. Do you think?" "No more experiments tonight," he laughed. "Some mysteries of human sleep can wait until next semester." Above them, the stars twinkled like scattered dreams, watching over a planet where humans and aliens were learning that understanding each other's differences could lead to the greatest discoveries of all.